Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the most complex technological leaps, whether they happened 60 years ago or 60 minutes ago, and really just distill them down to the insights you need to know.
And today we have a fascinating one.
We really do. It's one of the most, I think, intellectually compelling comparisons we've ever put together. And it all centers around a single name, Gemini 3.
That's right. And we're talking about two completely different things that share that name, separated by exactly 6 decades.
It's incredible.
On one hand, you have the 1965 NASA space mission, a huge, groundbreaking step on the path to the moon.
And then 60 years later, you have the 2025 launch of Google's new AI model, Gemini 3 Pro, just a giant leap in digital intelligence. When I first saw that shared name, I was just astonished, not just as a fun coincidence, but it's like a mirror. It reflects this constant human quest to push the frontier of what we can control.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
We're going from the visceral high-G risks of launching a 2-man capsule into orbit, complete with the smuggled corned beef sandwich,
We will definitely be getting to the sandwich.
to now managing, PhD-level code running on this incredibly complex, sparse architecture.
And that comparison, that's really our mission for this deep dive. We've got a ton of sources, historical archives, NASA engineering reports, technical papers on the AI model, benchmark analyses, developer insights.
So what are we trying to figure out?
The goal is to understand what it means to push the absolute limits, whether that's physical intelligence in space or algorithmic intelligence in silicon. We want to analyze the risks, the breakthroughs, and really ask, what can the audacious, tangible risk-taking of the 1960s teach us about managing the unpredictable complexity of the systems we're launching today?
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the original mission, the one that paved the way for Apollo. Let's talk about Gemini 3, the unsinkable step into space, launched March 23, 1965.
Right. And Project Gemini itself, you have to remember, was sort of the crucial middle child of the American space program.
It doesn't get the glory of Mercury or Apollo.
No, but it was essential. It bridged the gap between the single-person orbital flights of Mercury and the really complex 3-person deep space maneuvers they needed for Apollo. Gemini 3 was the first crewed mission of that whole program. It had to prove the hardware worked.
And the crew they picked was very intentional, right? A mix of an experienced veteran and a rookie.
Exactly. You had command pilot Gus Grissom, a Mercury veteran on his second trip to space, and you paired him with pilot John Young, who was making his very first spaceflight.
And that pairing itself was a milestone. The first time 2 American astronauts flew together in the same spacecraft.
And Grissom, well, he had some baggage going into this mission, you could say.
A little bit.
His previous capsule, the Liberty Bell 7, it famously sank right after splashdown.
Yeah.
And that incident, it really followed him.
Which led directly to the unofficial name for the Gemini 3 spacecraft.
Molly Brown.
The unsinkable Molly Brown. It's such a direct and frankly hilarious reference to the Broadway musical at the time.
It was Grissom's way of saying, with that dark astronaut humor, that he was absolutely determined this one was staying afloat.
It says so much about that culture, facing immense danger with a sense of humor.
Yeah. And the mission itself was actually pretty short. It was only 3 low Earth orbits done in just under 5 hours.
But the length wasn't the point.
Yeah, not at all. It wasn't about setting endurance records. It was all about proving one thing, maneuverability. That was the whole reason the Gemini program existed.
And that brings us to the most critical piece of engineering on that whole capsule.
The OMS.
The Orbit Attitude and Maneuvering System. This was the big upgrade from the Mercury capsules, right?
It was everything. I mean, Mercury could control its attitude, its pitch, roll, and yaw, but it couldn't change where it was going. It was a passenger.
Yeah.
Gemini needed to be a pilot. The OMS gave it the ability to change the actual size and shape of its orbit.
The first time any crewed spacecraft could actually maneuver in space.
That was the test.
So let's talk about that first maneuver, because it really is the engineering centerpiece of the whole flight.
It happened over Corpus Christi, Texas. Grissom and Young fired the OAMS engines for a full 75 seconds.
And this wasn't just a tiny little puff of gas.
Oh no, this was a substantial burn. It generated a delta V, a change in velocity of about 15.5 meters per second. That's a significant push. And it was enough to noticeably change both the size and the shape of their orbit.
Which was just non-negotiable for Apollo. If you can't prove you can do that, you can't do rendezvous, you can't do docking.
You can't land on the moon. It's that simple. They had to prove they could move from being, as you said, passive passengers of physics to being active pilots of a spacecraft.
So that was the first part of the test.
Right. And the test had 2 main components. First, prove you can change the orbit, but second, prove you can plan for failure. So they did another strategic burn during the third orbit.
And what did that one do?
That one lowered their orbital low point, the perigee, down to just 72 kilometers.
Okay, and that was basically a safety net, wasn't it?
Exactly. It was a pre-planned risk mitigation. By dropping that low, they guaranteed that even if their main retro rockets failed completely, atmospheric drag would eventually grab the capsule and bring it home.
So they used the very system they were testing to build in a backup for a catastrophic failure.
That's the mindset of the entire program, right there in that one maneuver.
Yep.
It was meticulous.
Beyond just the orbital mechanics, they were also testing some other pretty crucial systems. I've always been fascinated by the water injection experiment during re-entry.
That's a great one because it speaks to one of the scariest points of coming home from space. The plasma sheath.
The communications blackout.
Right. When the capsule hits the atmosphere at incredible speed, the air around it superheats, it ionizes, and it creates this envelope of hot plasma. And that plasma blocks all radio waves.
So for several minutes, at the most critical phase of re-entry, you're completely cut off from mission control.
Terrifying. So to try and fix this, they tested injecting water into that plasma sheet.
And how would that help?
The idea was that the water vapor would change the electrical properties and the temperature of the plasma just enough to let radio waves punch through. And it worked. It gave them valuable data for the Apollo re-entries.
So an incredibly successful engineering test flight. But now we have to pivot from the hardware to the human element. Because you can't talk about Gemini 3 without talking about the incident that became a cautionary tale for decades.
The smuggled sandwich.
With smuggled sandwich.
Yes. The non-man-rated corned beef sandwich. This story just perfectly captures that tension between rigid procedure and, the human spirit.
So what happened?
Pilot John Young, on his first flight, pulls a corned beef sandwich out of his spacesuit pocket, a totally unauthorized item. And about 2 hours into the flight, he offers Gus Grissom a bite.
The fact he got it on board is amazing enough. They took a few bites, commented on how good it was, and then had to put it away.
And while it's a really funny story, the higher-ups at NASA were absolutely furious when they found out. And for good reason. The whole concept of man-rated is central to astronaut safety.
Can you just break down what man-rated actually means in this context?
Sure. When a piece of equipment or food or anything is man-rated, it means it has gone through this incredibly rigorous process of testing and certification to make sure it's safe for human flight.
Safe under extreme conditions.
And critically, that it poses no danger to the crew or the spacecraft itself.
And the corned beef sandwich was not man-rated.
Not even close. Space food is designed to be moist, contained, crumb-free. And there's a very good reason for that.
Because in zero gravity.
In zero-G, crumbs don't fall. They float. They become tiny little projectiles that can drift into sensitive electronics and short something out, or even worse, get inhaled by the crew.
So it was less of a snack and more of a spontaneous, high-stakes contamination test of the capsule's environment.
You could say that.
Yeah.
Both men were officially reprimanded. The lesson was loud and clear. Stunts with unauthorized crumbly food were a systemic risk to the mission. It's a perfect example of how the human element is always the ultimate wild card.
And besides the sandwich, there were a few other small technical issues, which you'd expect on a first flight like this.
Yeah, a couple of minor things. There was an experiment to test zero-G on sea urchin eggs, and a little lever on it broke off. The photographic coverage was also only partially successful because someone had put the wrong lens setting on the 16mm camera.
And they had that weird yaw problem early on, right?
They did, a persistent yaw to the left. Grissom was worried it was a leaky thruster, which would have been a major problem.
But turned out to be something much smaller.
Yeah, after some troubleshooting, they traced it to a venting water boiler that was just creating this tiny constant push. A good reminder that even minute interactions can affect your trajectory.
But that the real moment of danger, the point where the engineering predictions actually failed the crew, came during re-entry.
This is a really crucial point, and it ties directly into the uncertainty we're going to talk about with the AI model. Despite all of that meticulous planning, the capsule landed 84 kilometers short of its target.
That's a 45 nautical mile miss? That's huge.
It is.
So what happened? Was it pilot error? A system failure?
It was failure of prediction. The spacecraft was designed to generate aerodynamic lift during re-entry, so Grissom could basically fly it to the landing zone. The problem was, the actual lift it generated in the real world was way less than what NASA's models had predicted.
And those models were based on wind tunnel studies.
Extensive wind tunnel studies. the absolute state-of-the-art predictive tools of 1965. And they just couldn't accurately model the real-world atmospheric dynamics.
That's fascinating. So the simulation was wrong, and it created this life-threatening error in the real world. Grissom just couldn't steer enough because the vehicle didn't behave the way it was supposed to on paper.
Precisely. It shows that even with the most careful physical engineering, the real world always holds surprises.
And the danger didn't even stop when they hit the water.
No, it was a violent splashdown. When the parachutes deployed, the capsule swung from vertical to horizontal so suddenly that it threw Grissom forward.
And he actually cracked his faceplate on the control panel.
He did. His acrylic faceplate cracked, a direct physical failure of a piece of safety equipment.
And that had immediate consequences for future missions.
Absolutely. That one injury was the main reason NASA immediately switched all future spacesuit faceplates. For the rest of Gemini, for Apollo, everything from that brittle acrylic to a much tougher, impact-resistant polycarbonate plastic.
Wow. So Gemini 3, 1965. A huge success, improving orbital maneuverability, a failure in predictable landing, a lesson in material science, and a stern warning about unauthorized snacks.
A test of ultimate control over hardware in a harsh physical world. And that perfectly sets us up for our second Gemini 3, separated by 6 decades, but facing an equally tough frontier of control in the digital world.
Okay, let's fast forward exactly 60 years. The Titan II rocket is gone, replaced by trillions parameters. And the goal isn't moving a capsule, it's advancing pure intelligence. We're talking about Gemini 3 Pro, Google's newest AI model.
And it's a radical shift. We're moving from, metal and hydraulics to matrix multiplication. Yeah. Gemini 3 Pro is built on what's called a sparse mixture of experts transformer architecture. Its knowledge cutoff is January 2025, so it's incredibly current.
And its stated goal is very ambitious.
Very. It's designed to push the limits of logical reasoning, multimodal understanding, and what they call agent capabilities.
Okay, that term, sparse mixture of experts, or MOE, that seems key. For someone who isn't deep in LLM architecture, how should we understand that?
It's actually a great analogy for efficiency. Imagine a traditional AI model, a dense one, is like one giant brain, and it has to use all of its neurons to answer every single question, whether you're asking it to write a poem or solve a complex math problem.
Right, which is super inefficient for simple tasks.
Total overkill. And MOE model is more like having a cabinet full of specialized expert brains. When you ask it a question, say a coding problem, a router mechanism figures out which experts are best for that job, maybe the code expert and the logic expert, and it only activates them.
So the rest of the model stays dormant. It's smarter because it uses specialists, and it's more efficient because it's not firing up the whole massive thing every single time.
Exactly. It routes the problem intelligently. And that's how they get this incredible capability without the insane operational cost of a dense model of the same size.
And the style of its output, they're aiming for something specific there too.
They are. The stated goal is for responses to be smart, concise, and direct, trading cliché and flattery for genuine insight.
So they're trying to move past the kind of, overly polite chatbot persona.
They want it to be a collaborator,
Yeah.
not a digital cheerleader. And based on the benchmarks, they're getting there.
Okay, let's get into those benchmarks, because the numbers here really do suggest a new state-of-the-art. On the Elmarina rankings, which is based on human preference, Gemini 3 Pro is leading with an ELO score of 1501.
But the really mind-blowing numbers come from the high-stakes academic tests. We are talking about genuine PhD-level reasoning. It scored 37.5% on something called Humanity's Last Exam without using any tools.
And an even more incredible score on GPQA Diamond.
A staggering 91.9%.
Wait, hold on. What exactly is GPQA Diamond? Why is that score so significant?
So GPQA is Google's primary question answering benchmark. The Diamond subset is specifically designed to test true expert reasoning. These are questions that require synthesizing knowledge from multiple, often conflicting or ambiguous academic sources.
So not just looking up a fact.
No, this is deep conceptual synthesis, stuff from molecular biology, theoretical physics, things that human experts would struggle with. Scoring 91.9% means it's performing better than almost all human researchers on tests designed to stump them.
Wow. And that's paired with a big leap in pure math ability, too.
A huge leap. It set a new state-of-the-art on Math Arena Apex, hitting 23.4%.
And what does that jump in math capability actually look like? Previous models were okay at high school algebra, but this is different.
This is a move into research-level math. Math Arena Apex has problems from differential geometry, abstract algebra, things that often require inventing a new proof technique on the fly. That 23.4% is a massive step toward an AI that can genuinely help professional mathematicians.
And this is all built on a foundation of better factual accuracy, 72.1% on simple QA verified.
Right, and when you combine that deep reasoning, the math skills, and the solid factual grounding, you get the makings of a genuinely capable expert agent.
But the biggest advantage, maybe even more than the reasoning, seems to be its native multimodality.
It's world-leading. It's not just, stitching a text model and an image model together. It processes text, images, video, and audio all at once in the same architecture.
And how good is it?
The scores are impressive. 81% on MMMU Pro, which is for complex reasoning with images.
Yeah.
And 87.6% on video MMMU.
Video understanding is notoriously hard for AI. What does that 87.6% score really mean?
It means the model can deeply understand continuous video streams. It can capture rapid action, like the subtle movements in a sports play, and create a coherent narrative from that footage. Think about it for analyzing a complex lab procedure or reviewing sensor data from an autonomous car. It's high-fidelity spatial and temporal understanding.
And that powerful multimodal engine is what powers its ability to be an agent, right? Especially when it comes to understanding a computer screen.
That is the critical link. This is where it gets really futuristic. The model is phenomenal at understanding user interfaces, scoring a 72.7% on the ScreenSpot Pro benchmark.
Okay, let's pause on that. You mentioned that competitors, like GPT 5.1, were scoring around 3.5% on that same test. Why is that gap so enormous?
It suggests Google has cracked a really hard architectural problem. ScreenSpot Pro isn't just about reading text on a screen. It's about understanding the layout, identifying interactive buttons, predicting what a click will do, understanding the intent of the design.
So it can look at a brand new app it's never seen before and just intuitively know how to use it.
That's what 72.7% means. It can grasp how to interact with a complex control panel or a web app, which is the key to being an autonomous computer user.
Which is vital for everything from robotics to autonomous vehicles. The AI is moving from being an observer to an operator.
And speaking of operating, let's talk about its coding performance.
It sounds like it's graduated from just writing simple code snippets.
Oh, way past that. This is about truly autonomous engineering. It scores 76.2% on SWE Bench verified. That's a benchmark where the AI has to solve real-world GitHub issues, bug fixes, new features, using the same tools a human developer would.
And it also topped the Web Dev Arena leaderboard, so it's not just solving problems, it's competing against top web developers.
And critically, it scored 54.2% on Terminal Bench 2.0. This shows it has mastered the command line. That's not trivial. It means the model can navigate file systems, manage servers, automate complex operations. It can operate the core infrastructure of the computer itself.
And all this high-level capability is what enables these wild new user-facing features like generative UI.
Yes, this is a paradigm shift.
The AI isn't just generating content anymore, it's generating the entire user interface.
Exactly. Traditionally, you'd ask an AI for a tool, and it might give you the code for it. Gemini 3 Pro generates and renders the interactive tool right there on the screen.
So what does that actually look like for a user?
Okay, imagine you ask it to explain a complex biological concept, like RNA polymerase. Instead of a wall of text, the AI generates an interactive simulation on the spot, a little physics model where you can drag the DNA strand or change the enzyme speed and see what happens.
Or the mortgage calculator example.
Right. You ask for a mortgage calculation, and it generates a fully functional tool with sliders for the interest rate, drop-down menus, a real-time amortization chart. You can play with it dynamically.
And they're rolling this out in the Gemini app through these experimental labs.
Two modes. There's visual layout, which presents information like an immersive magazine with rich media and customizable filters. So for a trip, you could have a slider to filter activities by pace, from relaxing to adventurous.
So it's letting you manipulate the data in real time with a custom interface.
And then there's dynamic view. That's where it really flexes, designing and coding a completely custom interactive response. For one unique prompt, you ask for a tool that doesn't exist, and it just invents the interface for it.
And for the absolute hardest problems, they've introduced something called deep think mode.
Yeah, deep think is an enhanced reasoning mode. It's basically telling the model, use more computation, take more time, solve this incredibly hard problem. And that's how it pushes those benchmark scores even higher. 41% on Humanities Last Exam, 45.1% on ARC AGI-2.
So it's like a temporary resource-heavy override for maximum cognitive power.
It is. And because of that, it's being rolled out carefully, first to safety testers, than to AI Ultra subscribers.
And the ultimate application of all this capability seems to be this new platform for engineers called Google Anti-Gravity. The name alone says a lot.
Anti-gravity is positioned as a revolutionary agent-focused IDE, an integrated development environment. The developer's role shifts from being a hands-on coder to more of an architect.
So you give the high-level goal, and the agents just do the work.
They autonomously plan, execute, and verify complex software tasks.
Okay, walk me through what that looks like. How does an agent work across the editor, the terminal, and the browser all at once?
All right, imagine you're the developer. You tell the agent, there's a bug report about a memory leak in our Python code. Find it, fix it, run the tests in the staging environment, and if they pass, deploy the hotfix.
That's a lot of integrated steps.
And the agent just starts. It uses its coding knowledge to analyze the code in the editor. Then it uses its command line mastery to spin up the staging environment in the terminal and profile the memory usage. It finds the leak, writes the fix in the editor, runs all the unit tests in the terminal.
And if the tests pass?
It interacts with the deployment pipeline, maybe through the browser or the terminal, and deploys the fix to production.
That is true autonomy. The developer is just supervising the architecture.
And for consumers, they're getting a version of this
Right.
with the Gemini Agent experimental feature for Ultra subscribers.
Bringing that multi-step capability to everyday tasks.
Exactly. It integrates tools like Gmail, calendar, web browsing. You can tell it, book me a mid-size SUV for my trip next week, under $80 a day, using the dates from that confirmation email I got.
And it just goes and does it.
It finds the email, pulls the dates, searches the rental sites, filters the results, and prepares the booking form.
But there has to be a safety check, a human in the loop.
There is, and it's crucial. The agent requires user confirmation for any major irreversible action. Sending an email, making a purchase, changing a system file. That's the first layer of algorithmic control.
This is a staggering leap in autonomous capability. But with that power, just like in 1965, comes profound and unpredictable risk.
And that's where we hit the frontier paradox. Both of these Gemini 3 projects represent the absolute peak of control for their time, but they both introduce a new kind of unpredictable risk. The risk just shifts from physical failure to algorithmic failure.
And the first part of that paradox is simply the price of performance. That world-leading intelligence in Gemini 3 Pro, even with the efficient MoE architecture, it isn't cheap to run.
That's the trade-off. It's more efficient than a dense model of the same size, but the model is so massive that the overall cost is higher than the previous 2.5 Pro version.
Let's break that cost down.
For standard context sizes, under 200,000 tokens, it's about $2 per $1 million input tokens and $12 per $1 million output tokens. But the price really jumps for those complex agentic tasks that need a big memory window.
Over 200,000 tokens.
The price basically doubles. It jumps to $4 for input and $18 for output, and deep think mode is expected to cost even more.
So if you want that PhD-level reasoning for your anti-gravity agent to debug your code, you're paying a serious premium.
You are. The model tries to make up for it by being incredibly fast. It can generate up to 128 tokens a second, but there's a clear commercial barrier there.
And here's the real conflict, the true paradox. This exponential capability seems to be paired with a higher chance of error. Early analysis suggests that Gemini 3 Pro has a higher hallucination rate than some of its competitors.
That is the most alarming finding and the core of the problem. The model is smarter, it's more capable of high-level thinking, and yet it is simultaneously more reliably unreliable.
That's terrifying when you connect it back to anti-gravity. If your architect agent has a higher hallucination rate, how can you trust it to operate autonomously in your terminal writing production code?
The complexity of the mistake grows with the capability. When Grissom's capsule landed 84 kilometers short, the error was physical and measurable.
Right.
When a deep think-powered agent in your terminal hallucinates, it could invent a system command that doesn't exist, or worse, deploys subtly flawed code that passes its own tests but creates a massive security vulnerability in production.
So the stakes go from a cracked faceplate to a systemic security breach. This takes us right to governance. Just like NASA had meticulous protocols, Google is using a framework to manage this risk.
Right, the NIST AI risk management framework. It breaks down into 4 stages: govern, map, measure, and manage. And this is all guided by Google's AI principles that they've had since 2018.
So let's start with govern. That's about transparency, right?
It is. It's about documentation. Google is mandating model cards for these advanced models.
What's a model card?
Think of it like a nutrition label for an AI. It's for developers and policymakers, and it details the model's intended use, its known limitations, like that higher hallucination rate specific risks, and the mitigations they put in place. It makes the black box a little less opaque.
Okay, next is map. How do you even begin to identify the potential dangers of a model this powerful?
It's a huge research effort. They're leveraging hundreds of internal papers on AI safety to build a taxonomy of risks. And they have to constantly update it as the models get more capable.
And what are the big risks they're mapping?
They group them into major domains. Biosecurity, could the AI help create a pathogen? Cybersecurity, could it be used for hacking? Self-proliferation, could it learn to copy or improve itself? And then general misuse, especially by state-backed actors. It's about thinking through the worst-case scenarios.
And once you've mapped the risks, you have to measure them. That means testing.
Intense multi-layered testing. It's called red teaming. They have teams, both internal and external, that are paid to attack the system before it launches.
Security red teams and content red teams.
Exactly. The security teams simulate cyber attacks. The content teams, like their content adversarial red team, run hundreds of exercises to find loopholes in the safety filters.
And they're now using AI to test AI.
That's the only way to do it at scale. They're training specialized AI agents to autonomously find vulnerabilities in other AI systems. They use AI autorators to speed up evaluation. They generate huge synthetic data sets for testing. This measurement phase is what tells them if their mitigations are actually working.
Which brings us to the final stage, manage. What are the actual strategies they use to control a model like Gemini 3 Pro?
It's multifaceted. They have rigorous safety filters, system instructions that are designed to steer the model away from dangerous topics, and detailed safety tuning on the model itself. Plus robust controls against things like prompt injection and data poisoning.
But the single most important management technique seems to be the same one NASA used in 1965.
Phased launches.
Phased launches.
Absolutely. Just like Gemini 3 was a short test flight before they tried anything more complex, Gemini 3 Pro is being deployed incrementally. It starts with internal testing, then moves to trusted external testers, then rolls out to specific subscribers, like the Ultra users getting the agent, before it ever reaches general availability.
And that lets them find and fix unexpected problems in the real world before it's deployed to 1 billion people.
And finally, there's the issue of provenance and trust. In an age of hyper-realistic AI-generated content, this is huge.
The risk of misinformation just skyrockets.
It does. And Google's primary mitigation here is a technology called SynthArt. It embeds an invisible digital watermark directly into AI-generated images, audio, text, and video. You can't see it or hear it, but an algorithm can detect it.
And they've open-sourced it.
Which is key. They're encouraging the whole industry to adopt watermarking as a foundational defense against synthetic media misuse.
This has been an incredible deep dive spanning 6 decades of engineering challenges. We started with Gemini 3 in 1965, Gus Grissom, John Young, 3 orbits, proving they could maneuver, but still wrestling with this unpredictable physical world.
A world where their best predictive tools, the wind tunnels, completely failed to model reality, leading to that 84-kilometer landing miss. The challenge was controlling a physical object.
And we end today with Gemini 3 Pro in 2025. A model with PhD-level reasoning, capable of autonomous coding, orchestrating tasks across an entire digital ecosystem with anti-gravity.
And here, the ultimate challenge is algorithmic control. It's managing this profound intelligence right alongside its known systematic higher hallucination rate. Both frontiers demand meticulous planning, but they both force you to admit that your most capable systems contain the most volatile, unpredictable elements.
And the shift from AI assistants that needed constant human handholding to these autonomous multi-step agents in anti-gravity and the Gemini agent, it's fundamentally changing the role of the human operator.
Which brings us to the provocative thought we want to leave you with. When you have autonomous AI agents that are simultaneously the most capable systems ever designed and are prone to being reliably unreliable, what governance structure is actually sufficient? How do you supervise an architect who is occasionally guaranteed to be wrong in ways you can't predict, especially when they have administrator privileges across your terminal, your editor, and your browser?
The controls needed for a corned beef sandwich in a tiny, closed physical system pale in comparison to the controls needed for a hallucinating agent that can autonomously deploy code across your entire digital life. That is the risk we are launching into 60 years later, and the stakes are arguably higher than they have ever been.